Marcus Chen stood in the rain outside Fletcher Industries, watching a woman crumble onto the concrete steps. Her designer coat was soaked, mascara streaming down her face as she sobbed into her hands. He had 3 minutes before his shift started. 3 minutes before his supervisor would dock his pay for being late again. But something about the way she sat there, broken, alone, invisible to the dozens of employees rushing past her, made him stop. He shrugged off his jacket, the only decent one he owned, and draped it over her trembling shoulders. She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes, whispered a barely audible, "Thank you," and Marcus disappeared into the building, already late. He didn't know her name. He didn't know that in 48 hours she would know everything about him. And he definitely didn't know that his $3 an hour job was about to change forever. Marcus had exactly $47 in his bank account when he woke up that Tuesday morning, which was $14 less than he needed for his daughter's field trip permission slip. He lay in bed for 3 extra minutes, doing the math in his head for the 100th time, trying to find money that simply wasn't there. Lily was still asleep in the twin bed across their cramped bedroom, her small chest rising and falling beneath the faded Disney princess comforter. She was 7 years old and deserved so much more than this. The apartment was silent except for the broken heater that clanked and hissed in the corner, barely producing enough warmth to matter. Marcus pulled himself up, his back aching from the double shift he'd worked the day before. 8 hours as a janitor at Fletcher Industries during the day, then 6 more hours stocking shelves at the grocery store at night. His ex-wife had left them 2 years ago, walked out one morning and never came back, leaving only a note that said she wasn't cut out for motherhood. Since then, it had been just Marcus and Lily against the world, and most days the world was winning. He made breakfast with what they had left. 2 eggs scrambled and split between them, a slice of toast each, and the last of the orange juice watered down to make it stretch another day. Lily ate quietly, her dark hair still messy from sleep, and Marcus's heart ached watching her. She never complained, never asked why they didn't have what other kids had, never mentioned that her shoes were too small or that she'd been wearing the same winter coat for 3 years. She just smiled at him with those trusting brown eyes and told him the eggs were delicious. The rain started just as they stepped outside, and of course Marcus had forgotten his umbrella. He held his jacket over Lily's head as they walked the 6 blocks to her school, arriving with his shirt soaked through and clinging to his skin. She kissed his cheek at the gate, and he watched her run inside, his heart simultaneously full and breaking. Then he ran the 12 blocks to the bus stop, missed it by 30 seconds, and ended up jogging another 2 miles in the downpour to make it to Fletcher Industries before his shift started. He was late anyway. His supervisor, Derek, was waiting by the service entrance with his clipboard and his perpetual scowl. Derek was the kind of man who seemed to take personal pleasure in other people's struggles, and Marcus had become his favorite target. "That's 3 times this month, Chen. You know what 3 strikes means." Marcus apologized, explained about the bus, the rain, his daughter, but Derek just shook his head. "Everyone's got problems. You think you're special? Dock of 3 hours pay and you're on bathroom duty for the rest of the week." Marcus nodded, swallowing his pride, swallowing his anger, swallowing everything except the need to keep this job, no matter what it cost him. He changed into his uniform in the dingy basement locker room, grabbed his cleaning cart, and began his rounds. Fletcher Industries was a massive corporate complex, 12 floors of gleaming offices where people in expensive suits made more in an hour than Marcus made in a month. He moved through their world like a ghost, emptying trash cans, mopping floors, scrubbing toilets invisible to everyone except when he missed a spot or took too long in someone's way. By lunch, his clothes had mostly dried, stiff and uncomfortable against his skin. He ate his sandwich, peanut butter again, because it was cheapest, sitting on a crate in the loading dock, watching the rain continue to pour. That's when he saw her. At first, he thought she was just another executive having a bad day, sitting on the front steps of the building in the rain. But as he got closer, he realized she was sobbing, her whole body shaking with the force of it. Employees streamed past her, some glancing, most ignoring her completely, rushing to their cars with briefcases held over their heads. Marcus stood there for a long moment, checking his watch. He had 2 minutes left of his break, maybe 3 if he hurried. Derek would be furious if he was late again. But this woman, he couldn't just walk past her. There was something about her grief that felt familiar, that reminded him of all those nights he'd cried alone after Lily went to sleep, wondering how he was going to make it through another month. He walked over slowly and without saying anything. He took off his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. She looked up at him, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that made him forget about being cold, forget about being late, forget about everything except the shared understanding that sometimes life becomes too heavy to carry alone. She was older than him, maybe in her 50s, with silver hair plastered to her face and makeup running in dark streams down her cheeks. "You'll get cold," she whispered, her voice raw. Marcus shook his head. "I work inside. You need it more than me right now." She opened her mouth to say something else, but he was already walking away, breaking into a jog toward the service entrance, already preparing his excuse for Derek. The jacket had been his only good one, the one he wore to parent-teacher conferences and Lily's school events, the one that made him look almost respectable. But he didn't regret it. He'd see that woman's face in his mind for the rest of the day, would wonder what had broken her so completely, would hope that his small gesture had helped even a little. He didn't expect to ever see her again. In a building this large, paths rarely crossed twice, especially between someone like him and someone who could afford a coat that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Derek was waiting, of course, and Marcus lost another hour's pay. He spent the afternoon scrubbing toilets on the executive floor, his hands raw and red, his back screaming, his mind calculating and recalculating the dwindling contents of his bank account. When his shift finally ended at 6, he grabbed his time card, saw the deductions, and felt something inside him crack. $47 minus 3 hours of pay. He was going backwards. No matter how hard he worked, no matter how many hours he put in, he was drowning a little more each day. And Lily's field trip was in 3 days, and she'd been talking about it for weeks, about how excited she was to go to the science museum with her class, and he was going to have to tell her no. He was going to have to watch that light go out of her eyes again, was going to have to be the reason she felt different from the other kids, less than them. He stopped by the grocery store on the way home, not for his night shift, but to talk to his manager about picking up extra hours. But there was nothing available, everyone desperate for more time, more money, more hope. He bought what he could afford: ramen noodles, a loaf of bread, peanut butter, a gallon of milk, and walked home through streets that had finally stopped raining. Lily was at the neighbor's apartment, Mrs. Rodriguez watching her like she did most evenings, refusing payment she knew Marcus couldn't afford. "She's an angel, that one," Mrs. Rodriguez said, as she always did. "You're doing good, Marcus. You're doing so good." But he didn't feel like he was doing good. He felt like he was failing a little more every single day. That night, after dinner, after helping Lily with her homework, after reading her 3 chapters of the library book she'd checked out, Marcus sat alone in the dark living room and let himself cry. He cried quietly, the way he'd learned to, so Lily wouldn't hear, wouldn't worry, wouldn't know that her father was terrified and exhausted and running out of options. He cried for the jacket he'd given away, for the field trip he couldn't afford, for the childhood his daughter deserved but would never have. And then he wiped his face, took a breath, and started planning for tomorrow, because that's what parents did. They kept going even when they had nothing left, because their children needed them to. Marcus was emptying trash cans on the 11th floor when he got the call to report to Human Resources. His heart immediately sank. This was it. Derek had finally convinced someone that Marcus was more trouble than he was worth, and they were letting him go. He thought about Lily, about rent due in 2 weeks, about the promise he'd made to her mother's memory that he would always take care of their daughter no matter what. His hands were shaking as he rode the elevator down to the 3rd floor, as he walked through corridors he normally only saw in the early morning before anyone else arrived. The HR office was nicer than anywhere Marcus had ever worked, with soft carpet and modern furniture and a receptionist who actually smiled at him like he was a person instead of a problem. "Mr. Chen, Ms. Fletcher will see you now." Marcus blinked. Ms. Fletcher? The company was named after the Fletcher family, old money that had built this empire over 3 generations. Why would someone from the Fletcher family want to see him? He followed the receptionist down a hallway to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the entire city. And there, sitting behind a massive desk, was the woman from the steps. the woman he'd given his jacket to. She looked different now, composed, professional, her silver hair pulled back, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in 6 months. But her eyes were the same, and when she saw him, something shifted in her expression. Relief, maybe, or recognition. "Mr. Chen," she said, standing up. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit down." Marcus sat, completely confused, his mind racing through possibilities. Had he done something wrong? Was the jacket some kind of test? Was he in trouble for touching an executive without permission? The woman came around the desk, and to his absolute shock, she was holding his jacket, cleaned and pressed. "I believe this belongs to you," she said softly. "I'm Eleanor Fletcher. I own this company. And you gave me your jacket when I was having the worst day of my life." Marcus took the jacket with numb fingers. I didn't know who you were," he managed. Eleanor smiled, and it was sad and warm at the same time. "I know you didn't. That's what made it matter." She sat down in the chair next to him, not behind her desk but beside him like an equal. "That day, I'd just come from the hospital. My husband, Richard, we'd been married for 32 years. He died that morning, heart attack. He was gone before the ambulance even arrived." "I'm so sorry," Marcus whispered, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Eleanor nodded, her eyes glistening. "I came here because I didn't know where else to go. This was his company, his life's work, and suddenly it was all mine and he was gone and I couldn't breathe. I sat on those steps for an hour and dozens of employees, people who work for me, people whose livelihoods I'm responsible for, they walked right past me. Some of them recognized me. I could see it in their faces, but no one stopped, no one cared, until you." She paused, composing herself. "You were late for your shift. I found out later that you got written up, that you lost pay because you stopped to help me. You didn't know who I was. I could have been anyone. But you gave me your jacket, the one I'm guessing you couldn't really afford to lose, and you made sure I was okay before you left. Do you have any idea what that meant to me? In that moment, when everything felt dark and pointless, a stranger showed me kindness with no expectation of anything in return." Marcus didn't know what to say. He felt exposed, vulnerable, like she could see straight through to all his fears and failures. I couldn't walk past someone who was hurting. I know what that feels like." Eleanor's expression softened even more. "I know you do. I looked you up, Marcus. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to know who you were, this person who showed such compassion. I know about your daughter, about your ex-wife leaving, about the 2 jobs, about how hard you're working to keep everything together." Embarrassment burned through Marcus. "I'm doing my best," he said quietly. "It's not much, but it's what I have." Eleanor reached over and touched his hand, and Marcus saw tears in her eyes again. "It's everything," she said. "And I want to help you if you'll let me. Not because I pity you, but because you reminded me what really matters. Richard and I built this company together, but somewhere along the way we forgot about the people who make it run. We forgot about people like you who work until their bodies break and still can't get ahead. That needs to change." She stood up and walked back to her desk, pulling out a folder. "I'm creating a new position, assistant to the CEO. The job would involve helping me understand what's really happening in this company from the ground up. You'd work directly with me, attend meetings, provide perspective from someone who actually knows what it's like to work multiple jobs and still struggle. The salary is $85,000 a year with full benefits, including health insurance and a retirement plan." Marcus couldn't breathe. 85,000? That was impossible. That was more than he'd made in the last 3 years combined. "I can't accept that," he heard himself say. "I don't have a college degree. I don't have any qualifications. I'm a janitor." Eleanor shook her head firmly. "You have the most important qualification of all. You're kind, even when it costs you something. You work hard without making excuses. You put your daughter first, and you see people, really see them, even when they're invisible to everyone else. That's what I need. That's what this company needs." Marcus felt tears running down his face and couldn't stop them. My daughter has a field trip in 3 days. It costs $61 and I can't afford it. I've been trying to figure out how to tell her she can't go. How to explain that again? I'm failing her. His voice broke. I work so hard, and it's never enough. I'm so tired. Eleanor's own tears were falling now, too. You're not failing her, Marcus. You're showing her what love looks like, what sacrifice looks like. But you shouldn't have to sacrifice everything just to survive. So what do you say? Will you take the job? Marcus looked at the folder in her hands, at the jacket in his lap, at this woman who had lost everything and still saw him, still cared. Why? He whispered. Why me? You could hire anyone. Eleanor smiled through her tears. Because when Richard died, I learned something important. We spend so much time building empires, making money, climbing ladders, and we forget that the only thing that really matters is how we treat each other in the small moments. You didn't give me your jacket because you wanted something. You gave it to me because I needed it and you had it to give. That's the kind of person I want beside me. That's the kind of person who can help me make this company something Richard would have been proud of. 3 months later, Marcus sat in his new office, his actual office with a door and a window and a nameplate, reviewing proposals for a new employee assistance program. The program would provide emergency loans, childcare support, and mental health services to Fletcher Industries' lowest-paid workers. It was Marcus's idea, born from his own experiences, and Eleanor had backed it completely. Lily's field trip permission slip was framed on his desk, along with a photo of her at the Science Museum, grinning in front of the dinosaur exhibit, wearing a new coat that actually fit. They'd moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood. Lily had her own room for the first time in her life. Marcus had paid off his debts. He was saving money. Actually saving it. But the best part, the part that made Marcus tear up when he thought about it, was the jacket. It hung in his office closet, cleaned and pressed, a reminder of the day everything changed. Not because he'd given it away, but because someone had seen that gesture and recognized it for what it was. One human being reaching out to another in a moment of pain. Eleanor had taught him that kindness wasn't weakness, that compassion wasn't something to be embarrassed about, that the small moments were actually the biggest ones. Last week, he'd been walking through the parking garage and seen one of the new janitors sitting on the ground, crying, clutching a phone. Marcus had stopped, sat down beside him, and listened. The man's mother was sick. He couldn't afford her medication. He was going to lose his job because he needed to take time off to care for her. Marcus had taken him upstairs to HR, had used his new position to help him get emergency leave, had made sure the company's new assistance program covered his mother's medication. And as he'd walked the man out, had seen the disbelief and gratitude in his eyes, Marcus had understood what Eleanor had been trying to tell him. This was how you honored someone's kindness, not just by accepting it, but by passing it on. By seeing the people everyone else looked past. By giving your jacket to someone who needed it, even when you could barely afford to. That evening, Marcus picked up Lily from her after-school program, something he could actually afford now, and they walked home together in the spring sunshine. She chattered about her day, about her friends, about the book she was reading, and Marcus listened to every word, soaking in her happiness like sunlight. When they got home, she did her homework at the kitchen table while he made dinner. Real dinner, with vegetables and protein and everything a growing kid needed. After they ate, after they did dishes together, after they watched a movie cuddled on the couch, Lily looked up at him with those trusting brown eyes and said, "Dad, I'm really happy." And Marcus, holding his daughter close, feeling the weight of worry finally lifted from his shoulders, whispered back, "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." The jacket hung in his office, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest ripples, that sometimes giving away the only thing you have left opens doors you never knew existed, that sometimes being seen, really seen, by another person changes everything. Marcus had given Eleanor his jacket in her darkest moment, and in return she'd given him something far more valuable, the chance to build a better life for his daughter, and the reminder that compassion always matters, even when it costs you something, even when no one's watching, even when you're tired and scared and barely holding on, especially then.